Good morning, my friends. Happy Sunday. All right. I'm saying this in every place that I can say it, whether it's Marco Polo, on my group coaching, every possible way place. It's Cindy Wetzel's birthday. Everybody say, Happy birthday, Cindy. We love you. She's amazing. And this is an amazing birthday for her. She is incredible. I love her very much. All right. June 16th, the healing of Naaman, 2 Kings 5, 1 through 19. The king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. At this time, Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day, the girl said to her mistress, I wish my master would go to see the prophets in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy. So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. Go and visit the prophet, the king of Aram told him. Get there, buddy. Sorry, the dog distracted me. I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel. So Naaman started out carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, With this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy. When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and said, Am I God that I can give life and take it away? Why is this man asking me to heal someone with leprosy? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me. But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him. Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is true prophet here in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message. Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy. But Naaman became angry and stalked away. I thought he would certainly come out to meet me, he said. I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord, his God, and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus and Abana and the Pharpar better than any of the rivers in Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed? So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, Go and wash and be cured. So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times, as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child, and he was healed. Then Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of God. They stood before him, and Naaman said, Now that I know there is no God in all the world except in Israel, so please accept a gift from your servant. But Elisha replied, As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept any gifts. And though Naaman urged him to take the gift, Elisha refused. Then Naaman said, All right, but please allow me to load 2 of my mules with earth from this. Bessie, you're going to knock over my computer. Stop. Please allow me to load 2 of my mules with earth from this place, and I will take it back home with me. From now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except the Lord. However, may the Lord pardon me in this one thing. When my master the king goes into the temple of God, Rimmon, to worship there and leans on the arm, may the Lord pardon me when I bow too. Go in peace, Elisha said, so Naaman started home again. The greed of Gehazi, 2 Kings 5, 20 through 27. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, My master should not have let this Aramean get away without accepting any of his gifts. As surely as the Lord lives, I will chase after him and get something from him. So Gehazi set off after Naaman. When Naaman saw Gehazi running after him, he climbed down from his chariot and went to meet him. Is everything all right? Naaman asked. Yes, Gehazi said, but my master has sent me to tell you that 2 young prophets from the hill country of Ephraim have just arrived. He would like 75 pounds of silver and 2 sets of clothing to give them. By all means, take twice as much silver, Naaman insisted. He gave him 2 sets of clothing, tied up the money in 2 bags, and sent two of his servants to carry the gifts for Gehazi. But when they arrived at the citadel, Gehazi took the gifts from the servant and sent the men back. Then he went and hid the gifts inside the house. What? What? What do you want? When he went in to his master, Elisha asked him, "Where have you been, Gehazi?" "I haven't been anywhere," he replied. But Elisha asked him, "Don't you realize that I was there in spirit when Naaman stepped down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to receive money and clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and cattle, male and female servants? Because you have done this, you and your descendants will suffer from Naaman's leprosy forever." When Gehazi left the room, he was covered with leprosy. His skin was as white as snow. The floating axe head, 2 Kings 6, 1-7. One day, the group of prophets came to Elisha and told him, "As you can see, this place where we meet with you is too small. Let's go down to the Jordan River, where there are plenty of logs. There we can build a new place for us to meet." "All right," he told them, "go ahead." "Please come with us," someone suggested. "I will," he said, so he went with them. When they arrived at the Jordan, they began cutting down trees, but as one of them was cutting the tree, his axe head fell into the river. Oh, Bessie. His axe head fell into the river. "Oh, sir," he cried, "it was a borrowed axe." "Where did it fall?" the man of God asked. When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it into the water at that spot. Then the axe head floated floated to the surface. "Grab it," Elisha said, and the man reached out and grabbed it. "Bessie, hey, not right now. Hey, hey, hey. No, not right now, buddy." Elisha traps the Arameans, 2 Kings 6, 8-23. When the king of Aram was at war with Israel, he would confer with his officers and say, "We will mobilize our forces. We will mobilize our forces at such and such a place." But immediately Elisha, the man of God, would warn the king of Israel, "Do not go near that place, for the Arameans are planning to mobilize their troops there." So the king of Israel would send word to the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he would be on alert there. The king of Aram became very upset over this. He called his officers together and demanded, "Which of you is a traitor? Who has been informing the king of Israel of my plans?" "It is not us, my lord the king," one of the officers replied. "Elisha, the prophet in Israel, tells the king of Israel even the words you speak in the privacy of your bedroom." "Go and find out where he is," the king commanded, "so I can send troops to seize him." And the report came back, "Elisha is at Dothan." So one night, the king of Aram sent a great army with many chariots and horses to surround the city. When the servant of the man of God got up early the next morning and went outside, there were troops, horses, and chariots everywhere. "Oh, sir, what will we do now?" the young man cried to Elisha. "Don't be afraid," Elisha told him, "for there are more on our side than on theirs." Then Elisha prayed, "Oh, Lord, open his eyes and let him see." The Lord opened the young man's eyes, and when he looked up, he saw the hillside around Elisha was filled with horses and chariots of fire. As the Aramean army advanced towards him, Elisha prayed, "Oh Lord, please make them blind." So the Lord struck them with blindness as Elijah had asked. Then Elisha went out and told them, "You have come the wrong way. This isn't the right city. Follow me, and I will take you to the man you are looking for." And he led them to the city of Samaria. As soon as they had entered Samaria, Elisha prayed, "Oh Lord, now open their eyes and let them see." So the Lord opened their eyes, and they discovered they were in the middle of Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he shouted to Elisha, "My father, should I kill them? Should I kill them?" "Of course not," Elisha replied. "Do we kill prisoners of war? Give them food and drink, and send them home again to their master." So the king made a great feast for them and sent them home to their master. After that, Aramean raiders stayed away from the land of Israel. Ben-Hadad besieges Samaria, 2 Kings 6:24-7-2. Sometime later, however, King Ben-Hadad of Aram mustered his entire army and besieged Samaria. As a result, there was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 8 pieces of silver, and a cup of dove's dung sold for 5 pieces of silver. One day, as the king of Israel was walking along the wall of the city, a woman called to him, "Please help me, my lord the king." He answered, "If the Lord doesn't help you, what can I do? I have neither food from the threshing floor nor wine from the press to give you." But the king asked, "What is the matter?" She replied, "This woman said to me, 'Come on, let's eat your son today, and then we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we cooked my son and ate him. And then the next day I said to her, 'Kill your son so we can eat him.' But she had hidden her son." When the king heard this, he tore his clothes in despair. And as the king walked along the wall, the people could see that he was wearing burlap under his robe next to the skin. "May God strike me and even kill me if I don't separate Elisha's head from his shoulders this very day," the king vowed. Elisha was sitting in his house with the elders of Israel when the king sent a messenger to summon him. But before the messenger arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "A murderer has sent a man to cut off my head. When he arrives, shut the door and keep him out. We will soon hear his master's steps following him." While Elisha was still saying this, the messenger arrived, and the king said, "All the misery is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" Elisha replied, "Listen to this message from the Lord. This is what the Lord says. By this time tomorrow in the markets of Samaria, 6 quarts of choice flour will cost only 1 piece of silver, and 12 quarts of barley grain will cost only 1 piece of silver." The officer assisting the king said to the man of God, "That couldn't happen even if the Lord opened a window of heaven." But Elisha replied, "You will see it happen with your own eyes, but you won't be able to eat any of it." Outcasts visit the enemy camp. 2 Kings 7, 3 through 11. Now there were 4 men with leprosy sitting at the entrance of the city gates. "Why should we sit here waiting to die?" they asked each other. "We will starve if we stay here. But with the famine in the city, we will starve if we go back there. So we might as well go out and surrender the Aramean army. If they let us live, so much the better. If they kill us, we would have died anyway." So at twilight, they set out for the camp of the Arameans. But when they came to the edge of the camp, no one was there. For the Lord had caused the Aramean army to hear the clatter of speeding chariots and the galloping of horses and the sounds of a great army approaching. "The king of Israel has hired the Hittites and Egyptians to attack us," they cried to one another. So they panicked and ran into the night, abandoning their tents, horses, donkeys, and everything else as they fled for their lives. When the men with leprosy arrived at the edge of the camp, they went into one tent after another, eating and drinking wine, and they carried off silver and gold and clothing and hid it. Finally, they said to each other, "That's not right. This is a day of good news, and we aren't sharing it with anyone. If we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. Come on, let's go back and tell the people at the palace." So they went back to the city and told the gatekeepers what had happened. "We went out to the Aramean camp," and they said, "and no one was there. The horses and donkeys were tethered, and the tents were all in order, but there wasn't a single person around." Then the gatekeeper shouted the news to the people in the palace. Israel plunders the camp. 2 Kings 7, 12 through 20. The king got out of bed in the middle of the night and told his officers, "I know what has happened. The Arameans know we are starving, so they have left their camp and hidden in the fields. They are expecting us to leave the city, and then they will take us alive and capture the city." One of his officers replied, "We had better send out scouts to check into this. Let them take the 5 remaining horses. If something happens to them, it will be no worse than if they stay here and die with the rest of us." So 2 chariots with horses prepared, and the king sent scouts to see what had happened in the Aramean army. Then they went all the way to the Jordan River, following a trail of clothing and equipment that the Arameans had thrown away in their mad rush to escape. The scouts returned and told the king about it. Then the people of Samaria rushed out and plundered the Aramean camp. So it was true that 6 quarts of choice flour were sold that day for 1 piece of silver. The 12 quarts of barley grain were sold for 1 piece of silver, just as the Lord had promised. The king appointed his officer to control the traffic at the gate, but he was knocked down and trampled to death as the people rushed out. So everything happened exactly as the man of God had predicted. And when the king came in, as the man of God had predicted when the king came to his house. The man of God said to the king, this time tomorrow in the markets of Samaria, 6 quarts of choice flour will cost 1 piece of silver, and 12 quarts of barley grain will cost 1 piece of silver." The king's officers had replied, "That couldn't happen even if the Lord opened the window of heaven." And the man of God said, "You will see it happen with your own eyes, but you won't be able to eat any of it." And so it was for the people trampled him to death at the gate. The woman from Shunem returns home, 2 Kings 8, 1 through 6. Elisha had told the woman whose son he had brought back to life, "Take your family and move to some other place, for the Lord had called for a famine on Israel that will last for 7 years." So the woman did as the man of God instructed. She took her family and settled in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. After the famine ended, she returned from the land of the Philistines, and she went to see the king about getting back her house and land. As she came in, the king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God. The king had just said, "Tell me some stories about the great things Elisha had done." And Gehazi was telling the king about the time Elisha had brought back a boy back to life. At that very moment, the mother of the boy walked in to make her appeal to the king about her house and land. "Look, my lord the king," Gehazi exclaimed, "here is the woman now, and this is her son, the very one Elisha brought back to life." "Is this true?" the king asked her, and she told him the story. So he directed one of his officials to see that everything he had lost was restored to her, including the value of any crops that had been harvested during her absence. Hazael murders Ben-Hadad, 2 Kings 8, 7 through 15. Elisha went to Damascus, the capital of Aram, where the king Ben-Hadad lay sick. When someone told the king that the man of God had come, the king said to Hazael, "Take a gift to the man of God. Tell him to ask the Lord, 'Will I recover from this illness?'" So Hazael loaded down 40 camels with the finest products of Damascus as a gift for Elisha. He went to him and said, "Your servant Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, has sent me to ask, 'Will I recover from this illness?'" And Elisha replied, "Go and tell him, you will surely recover. But actually, the Lord has shown me that he will surely die." Elisha stared at Hazael with a fixed gaze until Hazael became uneasy. Then the man of God started weeping. "What's the matter, my lord?" Hazael asked him. Elisha replied, "I know the terrible things you will do to the people of Israel. You will burn their fortified cities, kill their young men with a sword, and dash their little children to the ground and rip open their pregnant women." Hazael responded, "How could a nobody like me ever accomplish such great things?" Elisha answered, "The Lord has shown me that you are going to be the king of Aram." When Hazael left Elisha and went back, the king asked him, "What did Elisha tell you?" And Hazael replied, "He told me that you will surely recover." But the next day, Hazael took a blanket, soaked it in water, and held it over the king's face until he died. Then Hazael became the next king of Aram. Take your alligator, slimy, wet thing. All right. We are on page 69. What time is it? Okay. As the freedom train rolled on, I hit a small bump. Okay, it was a medium-sized bump. Work was picking up, my kids needed me more as they grew, and my life balance got a little wonky. I was in the thick of finishing my first book, still exercising every day, running a small business at our local church, when my body had a mini crash. I found myself in the hospital with meningitis, truly so blessed not to be sicker than I was, but with a road of recovery in front of me. Then the meningitis, hospital stay, influx of medicines in my system set off a series of alarms in my flesh. My autoimmune disease flared up, and I began to develop infections in various parts of my body. In the midst of this, I gained a significant amount of weight in a short amount of time. My particular autoimmune disease is Hashimoto's, which attacks the thyroid. I was diagnosed with it in 2008, and I've had seasons when it was more of an inconvenience and seasons when it was difficult to manage. The more minor symptoms are feeling cold and fatigued and having a hard time losing weight. But the more serious symptoms are the immunocompromised side. When I get sick, I get really sick. For a few years in a row, I got pneumonia when everyone else got colds. When I got meningitis, I got really sick. Bessie, stop. When I got meningitis, I got really sick. Everything just started breaking in my body, which was especially frustrating in the light of the health victory I had been living in. My heart was on the freedom train, but my flesh was faltering and experiencing pain. It was a tricky season, but I was grateful for the truth tucked into my heart. In the midst of all of that, I began to see a new trainer who worked with women with autoimmune diseases, and her program truly helped me to begin experiencing some healing. We cut out all the foods that aggravated my illness, and I did less cardio and more lifting weights since it was better for my adrenal system. I rested more, dry brushed my skin, and drank my water. My body quickly began responding to these shifts. I was so grateful. I was working hard, loving my body well with every intentional morsel that entered it, trying with everything I had to move forward in patience and gentleness since my body had been through so much. The trainer I was seeing had her own body image issues, and we occasionally talked about them. I had already begun to stand firm about the goodness of my own flesh, but it was still a tender topic at the time. There's never a good source to hear bad news from, but it's particularly painful when a misnaming comes from someone who is leading you. In this case, it was my trainer. I'd trusted her to guide me. I'd assumed that she was a believer and a compassionate woman. Because she was a believer and a compassionate woman, that she'd work from the same set of truths I did. But as I was about to discover, she was on her own journey related to loving her body as God's good creation. Alicia had coached me to affirm my body as I moved it, to agree with God's naming, especially when I felt weak. She'd even coached me to affirm my body as I tried on clothing in a dressing room, never letting a tender moment become ground for the enemy to tear my heart up. Bassy. But my trainer didn't have the same insight and wisdom as Elisa did. This was honestly understandable, and I'm not sure anyone on earth has as much wisdom and insight as Elisa did. It's with compassion and grace that I can tell you I completely forgive my trainer for what she said next. I know it was a mistake, and what the enemy meant for harm, I believe God has and will use for good. We were in the midst of a hard workout, me moving with every ounce of effort I had, and to distract me, she was catching me up on her own body image woes. I think I was doing squats with an annoyingly heavy bar. She had recently gained weight, and it was discouraging her, and she told me. I did another squat. I was barely paying attention. She was actually going to begin meeting with another trainer to help her get the weight off, she said. I did another squat. That's when she looked at me, and with tears in her eyes, she said, Jess, I only weigh about 10 pounds less than you right now, and it's so upsetting. In that moment, I dropped the bar. I took a breath and summoned every ounce of strength I could find in my body as I stepped slowly towards her. She'd been looking the other way and glanced at me in surprise, ready to tell me to go back to squatting. I had to speak the truth. My body is good, I said. It's not a marker of badness. Please don't compare yourself to me in a way that's negative ever again. She wasn't defensive, but nodded as I spoke, with tears in her eyes. Her face flushed with what I'm assuming was embarrassment. She was and is a child of God who loves and serves other women, and I know her intention was not to hurt me. She apologized. The rest of the workout was a little tense, but we both made it through the full hour we'd scheduled. I walked to my car and instinctively called Elisa. I was in tears. It was a lot like that first email. I didn't really know I was reaching out to her until I heard her voice on the other end of the line. And that's when I experienced one of the most miraculous phone calls I'll ever remember. I don't think Elisa even said hello. She just started talking when she picked up the phone. God told me you'd be calling, she said. He told me to tell you that your body is good and no one gets to say otherwise. He told me he loves you and you're doing great. Your body is good, and I'm sorry that happened. Your body is good. To this day, I've never told her the full story. I haven't needed to. We both remember that phone call with fondness, me because it absolutely cemented my belief that God loves me and cares for me intimately, and Elisa because it was another chance to utilize her gifting and ability to hear from him. But even more than for that phone call, I'm incredibly thankful for what it taught me. The world will not be kind to my body, and therefore it doesn't get to speak into it. All right. Go back to the chat. I just watched your interview last night. You were amazing and reminded me of the basics and why I'm on my journey. I love this group, and I'm so grateful for each and every one of you ladies and are here and encouraged. I'm so glad you watched it, Mallory. It was so fun to get to do that and to share my story. And I hope that, other people can relate, because the spiritual part of this journey is so much bigger than any other part of it for me. All right, my friends, let's go ahead and end in a word of prayer. God our Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this Sunday. We thank you for this Father's Day. And we thank you that you are our ultimate Father who loves us madly. And I just pray that you will help us to remain deeply rooted in that today and reminded of your just love for us. Even though many of us have wonderful fathers, many of us don't. There are women here who don't have fathers. There are women here who have incredible fathers and relationships. And there are women here who have lost their dads. But beyond all of our earthly fathers, we have you to just, we have you. And I'm so grateful for that. And God, I just pray that you will help us to remain in that today. As we go through our day, I pray that you will help us to love on to others, to be a picture of Christ wherever we go, to be a shining example of who you want us to be. I pray as we head off to our days, you will keep us safe, and just help us to remain in your love. In your precious name, I pray. Amen. All right, my sweet friends. I hope you have an amazing day, especially you, Cindy Wetzel. And I will see you all. If you guys are not signed up for the free week of coaching, we start tomorrow. Go get it. joyfullifewithkj.com, right on the main page. Yeah, go check it out. All right.